Peace, power, and light to all who come across this video today. This is Carter Archangel, and you are watching the Hermetic Principles series. So, a brief overview of the Hermetic Principles. They come from Thoth, which is the scribe. He's a part of the Egyptian pantheon, and he's the scribe who gave pretty much all the wisdom to the Egyptians. So, who we are, Kabbalion, this is the website that I'm on, kabbalion.org. They have a great explanation of the Hermetic Principles. So I'm just going to pretty much dive in and give my own pretty much explanation of what this is. But we're going to read over this, right? So this is rhythm. I believe this is either the fourth or fifth principle. So here it states, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates the Kabbalion. So it is the fifth. The great fifth Hermetic principle, the principle of rhythm, embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measure of motion, to and from movement, a flow and inflow, a swing forward and backward, a pendulum swing like movement, a tide like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide. Between the two poles manifest on the physical, mental, or spiritual planes. The principle of rhythm is closely connected with the principle of polarity described in the preceding chapter. And that's so true. We're going to take a quick intermission. I'm going to do this a few times throughout. So the principle of rhythm is really tightly connected with the principle of polarity because it represents that form of duality. You know, you have up and down, you have north and south, you have east and west when it comes to the cardinal directions. But when it manifests in the form of, when it comes to rhythm, polarity is a form of rhythm just in the relation to motion and the relation to rhythm and patterns and repetition and really time. So it seems that rhythm is closely correlated to the principle of polarity in that sort. So it says rhythm manifests between two poles, established by the principle of polarity. This does not mean, however, that the pendulum of rhythm swings to the extreme poles, for this rarely happens. In fact, it is difficult to establish the extreme polar opposites in the majority of cases. That's so true. But the swing is ever toward first one pole and then the other. So what they means by this does not, however, mean that the pendulum swing goes to the opposite extreme. Like I was just saying, when it comes to, when you have a north pole and you have a southern pole, right? I'm going to type it in. Hopefully we can get an example of. It's kind of like rhythm happens when, think about it in mood, right? When you have a mood, you don't just go from happy to distraught. You know, it takes time for it to manifest. You don't just go strictly from south to north. You know, you go in emotion, right? You take your time and you go through the. However, we can have those sporadic moments where it's kind of instantaneous, where we go from, you know, here to here. But it's stating that everything goes in emotion. Everything takes time. The pendulum swing is not just going to go here. It's going to go here and it's going to ripple. It's going to come back. That's kind of what that means right there. So there's always an action and reaction, an advance and a retreat, rising and a sinking, manifested in all the airs and phenomenon of the universe. Suns, worlds, men, animals, plants, minerals, forces, energy, mind, matter, yes, even spirit manifests this principle. The principle manifests in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life history of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. I believe what they're talking about here is the precession of the equinox and how we have changes of consciousness based on the stages of consciousness that humanity exists in. So we're going to look up the precession of the equinox. They should have something on this. This is actually the perfect example of rhythm, and I put this in my book. This is great. This is a great example here. We're gonna go to this one. You see how this represents the rhythm, and the principle of rhythm also manifests when it comes towards the seasons, right? You have summer, winter, fall, spring, autumn. It doesn't happen in that order, obviously, but you have that rhythm. Everything is a cycle. Everything is a cycle. This is a great depiction here. That's a clock of Giza. What else do we have? The spring equinox. Like this here. Let me focus on this one. So we have 12,000 years ascending cycle, and we have 24,000 years life cycles on Earth. So here we're actually right now we're in the age of Aquarius, but we're coming into the golden age. We just left the age of Pisces, and now we're heading into the golden age. And I did notice that when you come to the higher and the ascending years, you see here, we left Pisces, we're in the age of Aquarius. This is descending. You have 48,000 years in the truth age or the golden age. Let's take out another. So you have the spiritual age, the mental age, the energy age, and Kali Yuga, the material age. So we could find ourselves coming from here to here, This is how rhythm manifests in consciousness through the precession of the equinox. It says this happens in a cycle depending on the revolving motion of the sun, and each half cycle of ascending or descending takes 12,000 years. Exactly. Minds were onto something. One revolution of the sun around its dual as well as the grand center takes 24,000 years. The Brahma, Vaivarata, Purana, Lord Krishna tells Ganda Deva that golden age will come in the Kali Yuga. It will start 5,000 years. And this is a part of the prophecy with the Old Testament, how it talks about the Israelites. Wow, it's literally exactly what I was talking about. Literally. Seasonal precedence of zodiac ages. So you have spring, summer, autumn, winter. Man, it's crazy. So yeah, this is how rhythm manifests when it comes to consciousness. Precession equinox. This was like a really good. Yeah. So we're coming out right now. We're coming out of the Iron Age, and we're coming out of the Iron Age, which is Kali Yuga. That was destruction. That was almost about maybe 4,000. That was probably maybe 4,000 years ago. So we see ourselves coming into a golden age, and they talk about a new Earth and 5D Earth and stuff. So here it says, there's always an action and reaction, advancing and retreating, a rising and sinking, and a sinking, manifested in all of the airs and phenomena of the universe, suns, worlds, men. So we already read that. Alright, so here it says, beginning with the manifestations of spirit of the all, it will be noticed that there is ever the outpouring and indrawing, the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahm, as the Brahmin's word for it. Universes are created, reach their extreme low point of materiality, and then begin their upward swing. Suns spring into being, and then their height of power being reached, the process of retrogression begins. And after aeons, they become dead masses of matter, awaiting another impulse which starts again their inner energies into activity, and a new solar life cycle is begun. And thus it is with all the worlds, they are born and grown and die, only to be reborn. Thus it is with all the things of shape and form. They swing from action to reaction, from birth to death, from activity to inactivity, and then back again. Thus is with all living things, they are born, grow, and die, and they are reborn. So it is with all great movements, philosophies, creeds, fashions, governments, nations, and all else. Birth, regrowth, maturity, decadence, death, and then new birth. The swing of the pendulum is ever in evidence. That's beautiful. I mentioned life and death being a part of this cycle. We see a cycle in a rhythm, even in how we breathe. There is, so that's really amazing. Night follows day, and day, night. The pendulum swings from summer to winter and then back again. The corpuscles, atoms, molecules, and all masses of matter swing around the circle of their nature. There is no such thing as absolute rest or cessation from movement, and all movement partakes of rhythm. The principle is of universal application. It may be applied to any question or phenomenon of any of the many planes of life. It may be applied to all phases of human activity. There is always the rhythmic swing from the one pole to the other. The universal pendulum is ever in motion. The tides of life flow in and out according to the law. The principles of rhythm is well understood by modern science and is considered a universal law as applied to material things, but the Hermeticists carry the principle much further and know that its manifestations and influence extend to the mental activities of man, and that it accounts for the bewildering succession of moods, feelings, and other annoying and perplexing changes that we notice in ourselves. But Hermeticists, by studying the operation of this principle, where we leave off, have learned to escape some activities by transmutation. So here to talk about mental alchemy. Let's read on. The Hermetic masters long since discovered that while the principle of rhythm was invariable and ever in evidence in mental phenomena, still there were two planes of manifestation so far as the mental phenomena are concerned. They discovered that there were two general planes of consciousness, the lower and the higher. The understanding of that which enabled them to rise to the higher plane and to escape the swing of the rhythmic pendulum which manifested on the lower plane. So we're going to pause right here. We're going to continue, but what this is speaking towards is it's alluding to this here. This is the emotional guidance scale. Joseph Rodriguez has introduced me to this concept of the emotional guidance scale, and it makes so much sense. Before I came in contact with his information, and you guys should really go follow him. He does a really great job of explaining how consciousness works and how we utilize our consciousness on this journey, what we call the path or the journey of life. So this is how rhythm manifests, and this is pretty much what the law of rhythm, what they mean right here with the law of rhythm. We're going to continue, but I just wanted to show you guys real quick, and I'm going to kind of cross-reference this. So here it states, in other words, the swing of the pendulum occurred on the unconscious plane, and the consciousness was not affected. So it happened in the unconscious mind, or the feminine realm of the unconscious mind, or the subconscious mind, and the consciousness was not affected. This they call the law of neutralization. Its operations consist in the rising of the ego above the very vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity, so that the negative swing of the pendulum is not manifested in consciousness, and therefore they are not affected. It is akin to rising above a thing and letting it pass beneath you. The Hermetic master or advanced student polarizes himself at the desired pole, and by a process akin to refusing to participate in the backward swing, or if you prefer, a denial of his influence over him, he stands firm in his polarized position and allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane. So this is really amazing. What it's pretty much saying is that you can fine-tune your conscious mind, your conscious energy, kind of through will, but I don't want to say willpower because you don't want to strain your mind too much, but pretty much you can polarize yourself to the higher planes of consciousness. These are the higher planes of consciousness as far as they deal with emotions. And we know emotions are the key to activating our our conscious state are the key to activating thought forms. They are what bring thought forms to life. When you, for example, when you have a thought form, it's just an idea, right? You think about ice cream or something of that sort, and you get happy. That emotion is what ties you to that thought form, and it's all linked through vibration. It's all linked through an emotional frequency. So here we can see on the upward spiral, if I can zoom in, on the upward spiral you have, let me just double click this image. I had to double click this image. So here it says, in its operation consists in the raising of the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane. You create your reality. So true. Moving to change your reality. So this works as well. So what you want to do is polarize yourself to a point where you vibrate in this higher half. Down here we have shame, numbness, powerlessness, hopelessness, sadness, grief, fear, guilt, and anger. And these also represent the chakras. On this level of vibration, you have satisfaction, power, strength, self-esteem, dignity. And on the higher end, you have appreciation, love, compassion. So basically what they're saying is you want to get yourself to a level of unconscious competence. It says here that its operation consisted in raising the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane. So you pretty much are unconsciously competent, meaning that everything you touch turns to gold. Everything you do, you cannot be knocked off your pivot pretty much. You cannot be swayed by anything that happens to you. You know, you're not so easily swayed from here to here to here. You know, people that are swayed from one end of the pole to the other end of the pole are easily manipulated, and they don't have control over themselves or their emotions. So we're going to read on. So it says here, where do we leave off at? It says here that you must stand firm in your polarized position, and it allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane to where it doesn't affect you consciously. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery accomplish this more or less unknowingly by refusing to allow their moods and negative mental states to affect them. They apply the law of neutralization. So you don't want to just simply forget or become oblivious to what's going on, but you're not fazed by something. Somebody steps on your toe and you don't become reactive, and you don't act out of anger. You stay here. You stay vibrating on the higher frequencies. Wow, this is fascinating. I'm alive and I'm learning. Rather than, oh no, not again. This is reactive. This is reactive emotions, reactive behavior. So you stand firm. All individuals who have attained this, it comes more or less unknowingly, and by refusing to allow their moods and mental states to affect them by applying the law of neutralization. The master, however, carries this to a much higher degree of proficiency, and by the use of his will, he attains, which is just choice or decision. You have a choice. We have a choice. We have a choice to vibrate here or here. It's all on us. He attains a degree of poise and mental firmness, almost impossible belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backward and forward by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. The importance of this will be appreciated by any thinking person who realizes what creators of moods, feelings, and emotion the majority of people are, and how little mastery of themselves they manifest. If you will stop and consider a moment, you will realize how much these swings of rhythm have affected you in your life, and how a period of enthusiasm has been invariably followed by an opposite feeling and mood of depression. Likewise, your moods and periods of courage have been succeeded by equal moods of fear, and so has ever been with the majority of persons. Tides of feelings have ever risen and fallen with them, but they have never suspected the cause or reason of the mental phenomenon. So you become an adept. You become aware. First, it's about becoming aware. You are aware that you have a conscious mind and you have a choice. When they said will, you have willpower, you have choice. Now, you don't want to strictly use will. There are other tools and methods that you can use, like affirmations. You can say affirmations, positive affirmations in the rising, and also before you go to rest. This is because in states of rest, your brain waves are in a frequency where you're more easily susceptible to suggestions. They call it theta, delta, alpha, and gamma waves. So, an understanding of the workings of this principle will give one the key to mastery of these rhythmic swings of feeling, will enable him to know himself better and to avoid being carried away by these inflows and outflows. The will is superior to the conscious manifestation of this principle. Although the principle itself can never be destroyed, you may escape its effects, but the principle operates nevertheless. So this is a transmutable law. The pendulum ever swings, although we may escape being carried along with it. There are other features of the operation of this principle of rhythm which we wish to speak on at this point. So you can escape this. You can escape this by understanding where you are on the emotional guidance frequency scale. This is the vitality, tone, and attitude scale. So by understanding and being aware, you then have a choice to escape that. You say, I am happy, I am joyful, I am grateful, I am appreciative, I cooperate with my fellow man, I trust myself, I trust others, I have clarity, I am abundant, rather than being reactive to things that happen to our lives that don't serve us anymore. There come to operations that which is known as the law of compensation. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensate is to counterbalance, which is the sense in which the Hermeticists use the term. It is this law of compensation to which the Kabbalion refers when it says the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The law of compensation is that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction or to the opposite pole. So this is where you hear people say, I was down low, so now I have nowhere else to go but up. That's so true. The farther you fall, the harder you fall, the faster and quicker and the more proportion you have when you rise. The law of compensation is that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction on the opposite pole. The one balances or counterbalances the other. On the physical plane, we see many examples of this law. The pendulum of the clock swings a certain distance to the right and then an equal distance to the left. The seasons balance each other in the same way. The tides follow the same law, and the same law is manifested in all the phenomena of rhythm. The pendulum with a short swing in one direction has but a short swing in the other, while the long swing to the right invariably means the long swing to the left. An object hurled upward to a certain height has an equal distance to travelers on its return. The force with which a projectile is sent upward a mile is reproduced when the projectile returns to the earth on its return journey. This law is constant on the physical plane as reference to the standard authorities will show you. But the Hermeticists carry it still further. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is subject to keen suffering, while he who feels but little pain is capable of feeling but little joy. Wow, this hit home for me because lately I've been on a journey of finding myself at a point where I wasn't allowing myself at one point to feel great, to feel pleasure. I wasn't allowing myself to really be happy, and I noticed that even when I felt the emotions on this lower half of the scale, it didn't really feel right. It's like I was angry, but I couldn't fully feel angry. It kind of reminds me of the scripture where Christ or Yeshua or Jesus, whatever you want to call it, when he says, you can't be You can't be lukewarm. You cannot be lukewarm. We've seen many times where people have gone through a mental and pretty much an alchemical transformation where maybe they sold drugs or maybe they were poor at one point and they become some of the richest people. Like the pursuit of happiness, the swing to the left is equal to the swing to the right. The harder you fall, the greater force you will have getting up. They say what goes up must come down, right? So, on the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly, but whose nervous organisms and temperament cause them to suffer exquisite degrees of pain. And so it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment but also the most intense suffering. So allow yourself to be in a moment. Allow yourself to feel with full capacity. The rule is that the capacity for pain, pleasure, and each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is in full operation here. That gives a lot of insight into the amount of degree you have to allow yourself to feel. You have to allow yourself to express and balance your chakras. But the Hermeticists still go still further in this matter. They teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far proportionally toward the other pole of feeling. So, let's say an affirmation here right now. For those of you who want abundance, or for those of you who desire attaining a goal or a certain amount of money of abundance, and you feel like you're at your lowest point, just know you will have a point. You will achieve abundance. You will have wealth. You will manifest wealth. You will manifest an abundance of money. The swing to the left is equal to the swing of the right. You just have to trust and believe that it will happen. So let's say I am abundant. I attract money. I love myself. I allow myself to express my emotions in their full spectrum. They hold, however, that the negative is precedent to the positive in this matter. That is to say that in experiencing a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will have to pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. On the contrary, the pleasure is the rhythmic swing according to the law of compensation for a degree of pain previously experienced either in the present life or in a previous incarnation. This throws a new light on the problem of pain. Wow. I would sometimes wonder about that. The Hermeticists regarded the chain of lives as continuous and as forming a part of one life of the individual, so that in consequence the rhythmic swing is understood in this way. While it would be without meaning unless the truth of reincarnation is admitted. But Hermeticists claim that the master or advanced student is able to a great degree to escape the swing toward pain by the process of neutralization before mentioned, by rising onto the higher plane of the ego. Much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. Notice how it says much of the experience of that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane. We have a choice. The law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noticed that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another, and the balance is struck. No one can keep his penny and have the bit of cake at the same time. That's where that saying comes from. You can't have your cake and eat it, right? I beg to differ on that saying. Everything has its pleasant and unpleasant sides. The things that one gains are always paid for by the things that one loses. The rich possess much that the poor lack, while the poor often possess things that are beyond reach of the rich. The millionaire may have the inclination towards feasting and the wealth wherewith to secure all the dainties and luxuries of the table, while he lacks the appetite to enjoy the same. He envies the appetite and digestion of the laborer who lacks the wealth and inclinations of the millionaire, who gets more pleasure from his plain food than the millionaire could attain even if his appetite were not jaded, nor his digestion ruined, but the wants, habits, and inclinations differs. And so it is through life. The law of compensation is ever in operation, striving to balance the counterbalance, and always succeeding in time, even though several lives may be required for the return of the swing of the pendulum of rhythm. The swing of the pendulum of rhythm. Wow. That was a handful. I appreciate you all for watching this video. Please make sure to leave a like. Make sure that you follow the channel, subscribe to the channel. And make sure that you share this video. Maybe it can help you. Hopefully it helped you and gave you insight into how our emotions are related to the law of rhythm. When it comes to mental alchemy, you are in control. You are the master, not in controlling in the sense of negativity, but you have dominion over your mind. You are the master. You are the creator. You are an infinite being. You are an infinite intelligent being, infinite creative being, and this is a beautiful life. So thank you guys for tuning in to this transmission with me on this journey. This is Carter Archangel. I'll see you guys later.